Something doesn't seem quite right.
Welcome to Not Quite Right. I'm Ed.
I'm Amanda.
Amanda, I've had the pleasure of seeing the new Brad Pitt movie.
Have you
Bullet
indeed?
Train.
Have you indeed?
Have you seen it?
I have. I think I have because I've seen the previews, and that's effectively the entire movie. So I feel like I've seen it. Yes.
So I saw the preview. I think you showed me the preview. You sent me the link to the preview.
Mm-hmm.
And the only reason I actually watched the movie is because I just couldn't.
Because he's dreamy.
Because he's so dreamy. I couldn't believe that he would be in a movie that was that bad, like Brad Pitt.
I know.
Because I'm, I've told you before, I like him as an actor. He's usually in a lot of great movies.
He's talented. I mean, I think that's a fair.
He's talented and he tends to choose good movies. Like,
Yes.
you can list 5 or 10 movies he's been in that are pretty good movies by good directors. I thought, well, and he's not like poor or anything where he needs to.
He's the opposite of poor.
Yeah, you would expect he's got some money unless he's made some really terrible decisions. So just thinking, well, that preview looks really awful. The movie must just be a bad preview. I'm just going to watch the movie. And it was an awful movie.
Well, I mean, but I'm the same as you. I watched the preview and I'm thinking, okay, there's not a single redeemable feature here that makes me think this is going to be a good movie. And yet I cannot believe that Brad Pitt would do a movie that is this bad.
Yeah.
So what, I mean, apart from the obvious, what made it bad?
So look, I'm not really sure who the audience for this is because it's aimed intellectually at 10-year-old boys, yet it is really violent and people are constantly getting, I don't know, decapitated and
Okay.
it was very violent, very bloody, very gory. But everything about it, it's so stylized in that way where you've got these groups like the Japanese gangsters and they're all wearing sunglasses and they walk around really cool with swords.
Amazing.
It's just completely unbelievable. It's completely cliche.
Which I love. I love a bit of cliche.
It can be done in this knowing way, in this tongue-in-cheek way, but it was just done in this serious and everything about it just seemed to rip off 10 other movies. It was just the same thing done again. It was that's like a kind of Tarantino style, but you can't
imitate Tarantino. There's just no point even trying.
And the dialogue was terrible. When I say it's intellectually aimed at 10-year-old boys, it's because everything is explained. Everything that happened, someone is revealed to be the bad guy that you thought was the good guy.
Yeah.
And then some character would say, oh, so he's the bad guy.
Oh, God.
To the point where you cannot let anything go unexplained.
Yes, but that's just I don't mean to get racist right off the bat here, but that is the American way, is it not? To over-explain. I mean, that's certainly my feeling.
It's the way of bad movies. There are good movies that kind of maybe give the viewer a little bit of credit. They've explained it visually. They don't also have to say it.
Yes.
But the thing is with Brad Pitt, his character, he plays like a kind of a stoner guy in it. And I think I wonder how much of it was his choice and how much of it was the script. But he manages to deliver some of these really stupid lines just because he plays that kind of persona.
Right.
So I'll give him credit as an actor being well, I've got this script that's obviously really infantile. And he's like, so I've got to say, so that's the bad guy. And he delivers it in a way that he's like, so that's the bad guy because I'm a stoner and that's kind of...
And when you say he delivers it, are we saying he pulls it off or not?
Look, yeah, I mean, he does a okay job, but it's just not good. It's not good. Yeah. And look, the whole plot... It's just one of those plots where every single thing happens. There's a million twists. People change sides, and then there's a twist, and someone dies every 5 seconds because otherwise you'd get bored. If something
because nothing's actually
completely
happening.
If the whole thing didn't completely change every 5 seconds, but every single kind of twist is wildly implausible and really stupid. And by the end of it, they compound on each other where you're just like, what the fuck is going on? In this plot at the end of it, you're like, okay, so he's on the train because he's trying to get some money to these guys, but the woman there wants to kill that guy who actually turns out to be her dad.
Wait, but hang on. Aren't you a fan of Tenet?
Yeah, but no. That's a different story. That's a completely different
is
story.
Is it though?
No, I
is
like
it
that.
though?
No, that's a completely different story.
I don't know.
Tenet didn't explain anything. This is like the opposite movie. Like, this is
yeah, right. No, you're right. It's the exact opposite. I mean, I don't know what you were expecting going in there. I feel like you should have probably had some sort of inkling that this might be the outcome.
No, I did. I just kind of refused to believe that.
Yeah.
Like, has he just given
like
up?
he's just fallen.
He's just given up on life now.
Grace.
He's just like, well, I've done my movies.
Yeah.
And now I'm just gonna
do whatever I want.
Just gonna roll with it, like whatever happens.
I mean, maybe it's a case of like he wants to be near his family, or he wants to, like different priorities. I mean, he probably has a 10-year-old kid at this point who he's making the movie for now. I don't know. Like, I guess, or like, honestly, they probably just paid him an absolute shit ton of money because they knew that no one would watch it unless Brad Pitt was in it. And so they had to really just throw their entire budget into him, and that's it.
Yeah, look, some people liked it. A friend of mine, I messaged, I've got a group chat, and he was like, yeah, I liked it. And a lot of movies are that way. Like, I have not seen any of the Marvel movies or any of the superhero movies.
Not for many years.
But it's exactly the same kind of.
Yeah, it's what my friend Pat likes to call. She calls it chewing gum for the eyeballs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what's the name of the movie with the bagel, the everything bagel?
Yeah, Everything Everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, my feeling coming out of that movie, like I was absolutely glued to my seat in that movie. I thought that was amazing. That's the best movie I've seen in quite a long time, and I know you don't share that opinion, but I think what I feel is different about that to what you're describing here is like you feel like the writer has just gone nuts. Like they just did what they wanted. They just had so much fun.
Yeah.
And no holds barred. Like, I don't care if this is going to be stupid. I don't care if it's not going to make sense. I'm writing what I think's hilarious. I'm writing what I think's clever or what I think's cool, what I want to see happen on screen, like these crazy fight scenes and all this sort of really just random stuff going on, just because the person writing it is just giggling to themselves, like imagining this epic scene. And I feel like it might be the same thing with Bullet Train. Like you've just got someone, and I'm going to hazard a guess that it's a bunch of dudes writing this film, and just having fun with it and just being like, oh, wouldn't it be hilarious if, and pissing themselves about the line, oh, so he's the bad guy. They were pissing themselves when they wrote that. They were having the time of their lives, and they were probably high. And if you were high when you were watching it, maybe you would also find it funny. I don't know.
You definitely, but you could argue that if you have to be like off your face to enjoy something, it's probably not the best.
There's a lot of demographics we need to serve in the community.
I feel this particular demographic is probably overserved. But look, I didn't love that Everything Everywhere All at Once movie for a lot of reasons, but it's not even a comparison. Like that's basically Citizen Kane compared to Bullet Train. It's
better than. Don't listen. Now you got me started on Citizen Kane, which I hate. Okay,
didn't even have Brad Pitt in it.
It did not. It did not. It's a shame. Well, don't give them ideas. They'll do a reboot.
Oh yeah, Citizen Train.
Well, I've just finished reading your book, The Old Man and the Sea. Thanks for the loan. Nice quick one to fill out my 40 before 40 book challenge. Have you read it? You haven't read it for a while?
I read it. It was like 20 years ago or something like that. Well, how old am I? 25 years maybe.
Well, just to refresh your memory, what it's about is it's about an old man and the sea.
And the sea. I believe there was a fish.
There was a fish involved. It's funny because, again, if we're talking oversold, right, like it's Hemingway, so you just think, okay, this is going to be literary genius. And even just the jacket on the book that you loaned me, the comments are things like, it's perfect, you couldn't change a single word or a single sentence, every single word needs to be there, this kind of thing, like that it's just actually perfect. And so you go into a book with that kind of claim and you think, all right, first, well, I've got my guard up when I see stuff like that. I'm like, well, I don't know about this, but you think it's Hemingway, all right, okay, I believe it. And I read it in a single night.
Yep.
Because I couldn't sleep and I was just reading and reading.
It was that. So you're saying it's unput downable?
Well, no. I think I just couldn't sleep.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call it unputdownable, but it really was perfect. Like it really was.
Yeah.
And I don't know how it was because it's very simple. It's a man who goes fishing. Like that's the premise basically. And it's the dialogue, like he's talking to himself. He's on his own on a boat the vast majority of the time when almost nothing is happening. Like anyone who's ever been fishing would know the fishing trip is mostly just waiting around, and that's what the book was like.
Yeah.
But when they said that, there wasn't a single word that you could change to make it better, I think that's true, and I don't know how you can do that. It's very short.
Yeah.
And he really did just convey this whole world, and yet just such a brief snippet. And I do think that's very impressive. I think he gave a good sense of place, good sense of character. I didn't need to describe the character at all. Like he just presented with the situation. And I was impressed. And I guess I don't know, it feels like overselling it because it really is just a very sweet sort of simple story. It's certainly no bullet train. There's not a lot going on.
I think if I remember correctly, the story behind it, it was kind of late in his career, and
yes, it immediately preceded his Nobel.
Yeah, it was published in a magazine like the New Yorker, I think maybe, or another literary magazine.
That makes sense.
So it wasn't published
as a serial.
No, I think it was published in a single edition.
Okay,
but I could be wrong about this. This is just from memory. And that really kind of clinched his Nobel Prize. It was kind of a success based off that. And it is a really it's short. It's not. It's longer than a short story. It's like
it's a novella.
It's a novella, right?
Yeah.
And I think you could say a similar thing about The Old Man and the Sea and maybe Hemingway's, as with Citizen Kane, being that you picking up Hemingway now and reading, it's hard to really get why it's so good without comparing it to the other writing of the time and seeing how he really simplified and stripped everything back and really kind of set that tone, no adverbs and only say, show, don't tell. That kind of stuff comes from him, maybe not directly the word-wise coming from him, but definitely that was him who reduced writing to its kind of core. It's just saying exactly what's happening, not trying to get elaborate about it, just telling that direct story.
But I disagree with you. You're saying you have to look back at it now with reference to what it was at the time and how big it was at the time. I disagree. I think you can look at it now and still see how it's the bones of something beautiful. You know me, I have been educating myself about how to write for the past 10 years heavily, and then obviously my entire life before that. And I overthink things to the extreme. And so it's absolutely amazing to read something like this. But I don't think he could ever imitate it.
Yeah.
I don't think he could ever imitate it. He's just got this complete perfect knack for just choosing words and making just a very simple sentence sing. But they all work together. I don't think if you picked out any single sentence, there's probably not many that you would call a beautiful sentence on its own.
Yeah.
But the way they build on top of each other, the way, things are called back later, and just the way he develops character just through dialogue. I think, if you think of some of his short stories as well that are like pure dialogue.
Yep.
And how he can just convey this whole life story almost in just these brief snippets. And I do think that it's not just about the time. I think it's something that we could all learn from now. We do overthink things, and we do, there's always this push now in writing, like there's got to be more conflict, more drama. Everything's got to be high stakes. If you think of every Netflix show, like someone's getting their head chopped off in the first, scene because that's the only way you're going to get viewers to sit and be hooked. And I don't know that you do need to do that. I feel like there's really something to be said for just stripping it back and just making it real.
Today, we're talking about the writing advice, write what you know.
Yeah, it's one of those I feel it gets bandied about. It does get bandied about. It doesn't just get offered as advice. It's like we've accepted it as truth without really interrogating it. And I know that, we were talking about Hemingway before, it gets attributed to him that this was his advice. It wasn't. Yeah. He never said that, at least as I don't know anywhere that it's been recorded that he said that. But you can attribute it to many, many writers now. A lot of writers are perpetuating that. So, Stephen King's talked about this. All the top writers have sort of touched on this. But usually, with the modern writers, they'll give it the twist of like what you know is really what you feel as a person, what you perceive in the world. So it's not really about writing about what your cognitive, knowledge is. It's about writing about, from your perspective, your view of the world and what you see and what you perceive, which is, I think, a cop-out because I don't think that's the same advice at all. Yeah. That's a completely different point, to write about what you feel, to be truthful in your writing. I think that's what they're saying. Be truthful, be honest, be raw. But write what you know is a different thing. I mean, and maybe we don't need to take it literally, but even if we don't take it literally, it's still implying that you need to write about, your personal experience in some way. Yeah,
and I think the word "know" is the wrong word for that sentence. Like it's just not. It doesn't really convey the idea that I think that is trying to get across.
What idea do you think? I mean, this is the thing. We don't even know who supposedly said it. So what is it trying to get across? I mean,
so I mean, to take write what you know literally is to say, well, write what your personal experience is, write things that you have knowledge about, things that you like, maybe your hobbies or your work or the way that you were brought up. There's a kind of implied only in there, like only write what you know, instead of writing about other people's experience that you may not have direct contact with.
I think certainly write what you know if we're talking about your life experiences and perhaps, like the industry you work in, your life experience, that your family, your individual place in the world. I think that's good advice. I think it's really good to get into deeply something that you know a little bit about. And I think that is very resonant when people do that. So, and it doesn't need to be much. I mean, we do a lot of flash fiction writing together and you read other people's flash fiction. And sometimes it's just a sentence or a phrase or a turn of phrase that people use and you just think, wow, that person knows all about that industry, or that person knows all about that place that they've written about. And they can convey so much in such a short time because they know it deeply and they know what the essence of it is. And so they're bringing that essence to their writing. And I think for sure that can be amazing when people know something so deeply that they can communicate about it very clearly and very emotively, which someone coming at it from the outside could research all they want and may get to a point where they're still communicating well about this thing, but there's that intimacy is not there.
Yeah, and there are a lot of examples of writing where people have been very successful writing about their own very personal experience.
Yes.
There is the Neapolitan series by Elena Ferrante, which is very semi-autobiographical. She's literally writing about her life in a fictionalized setting, and I think that works, but that's not really what I think people are talking about because it's a very narrow interpretation.
And it sort of implies that what you know is interesting enough to write about too. I mean, if you've got an interesting life, and I'm thinking Frank McCourt and Angela's Ashes, like if you're going to write something like that, then please bring that to the world because that's a voice that is important. That's a voice that's just going to echo through time. But if you're me and you've lived a sheltered suburban life and there's some pretty fascinating novels about sheltered suburban lives, so I'm not discounting that either. And I guess, who's to say what's valuable and what's not, but I guess most writers who balk at this advice would be the kind of writers who say, well, my life's not that exciting. Like, I want to imagine dragons and castles because that's better than what I've got on offer at home.
I think I read a quote by Ursula Le Guin, which was, write what you know, but what you know might be dragons.
Yes.
So if I say, like, is it good advice? Like, what's it trying to actually tell you? I think for a writer who's starting out and who has expectations about what novels should be about or what writing should be about, maybe this is probably much more relevant 30 years ago when I think writing was a lot more homogenous and kind of there weren't so many genres and so much different kind of experiences out there where you might be a writer and thinking, well, I've read novels and they're all kind of like a certain way, right? And
you're trying to imitate, is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Don't
you might
imitate.
feel compelled to imitate in a way, not necessarily the voice or anything, but kind of the style, the kind of novel or something about the structure or something about the experience that may not be your own or may not kind of motivate or resonate with you. And what it's saying is write what you feel that you need to write, like find the thing within you that wants to come out.
Yeah.
And whether that's your experience personally or not, maybe it's, maybe you're writing about dragons because that's what you think about all the time. Maybe you're writing about someone else's experience because you find it really interesting and compelling and you've researched it and you understand it and you really want to write about it. I think that's all kind of within the realm of what that advice is trying to say.
I don't know. I disagree. I think what we're saying is write what you know with all these caveats, which is what I'm saying modern authors do now. They all say it. They all say, write what you know, but what you know actually means what you feel. It's like, well, no, that's not actually true. Okay, that's a different piece of advice and it's better advice in my opinion, my inexpert opinion. But I would think that this advice, if we're taking write what you know at face value, just reflecting on what you said just then, I think what I picked up, I think it's really good advice for someone who's new. And I think that's all it is. I think it's good advice to not imitate. And I think that's where its value lies. So if you're coming at the writing game and you've got this view of what writing should be and you've got these lofty goals and it's all about the shoulds. Do you know what I mean? Like you're coming at it with the shoulds. This is what it should be. This is what I imagine it's going to be, as opposed to writing what's in you. You're writing what you think you should be writing. And I think if the advice could be useful to someone in that position to say, forget all that crap, forget all what you've read, like it's all in there as background for you, but now write your story. When you're starting out, I think maybe taking that literally isn't the worst idea in the world. But if you're into fantasy and what have you, that is still what you know because it's probably what you've read your whole life. So if you've read all about dragons your whole life, write about dragons. If that's what you're passionate about, don't feel like you have to go and write some literary novel. Don't feel like you have to go mimic Hemingway because that's the only way you will be valid as an author. You have to write your story. You have to put your voice out there and your voice is what you know. Put that on the page instead of trying to put someone else's stuff.
I think that's the crux of it is that just that affirmation that writing is about self-expression and you need to bring yourself to the writing process.
Whatever that means.
Yeah, so you express yourself. And that's why the word no is not the right word, because it has the implication that it's knowledge that is in your head, that is experience that you've lived or some area of expertise that you have. And that's really not what it's saying. And again, we don't know who said it. So
Well, I'll tell you what Hemingway said, right? I've got it here. So a lot of people attribute the quote, write what you know, to Hemingway. And as I said earlier, he didn't actually, as far as I know, actually say that. So the quote that's often associated with this claim is from The Art of the Short Story, which it was written as a sort of a speech, like an address to graduating students. And he said, "You throw it all away and invent from what you know. I should have said that sooner. That's all there is to writing." So he actually never said write what you know. He said you invent from what you know.
Yeah.
And this is in the context of talking about a character that he wrote who was a massive bitch. And he was basically saying, so I knew this bitch and I wrote this character and it's all about her. And that's where I got my inspiration. And it's not her, but it is her. And then I wrote about this other guy and that's about this other guy that I know.
Yeah.
And then there's this other guy and he's my mate. So I wrote him completely honestly and that's him. And I just changed his name because I didn't want to get him in trouble. So basically that's what, if we're attributing it to Hemingway, that's what he was saying is like, invent from what you know. So have it come from your experience, but it's still your story to tell. It's still your invention. It's not like you're just reporting facts from real life.
Yeah. And look, I really like that quote because he's talking about something really important about writing that is not maybe obvious. I think it's obvious to people who are natural writers, but may not be obvious to kind of someone who's aspiring and wants to write, because you might approach writing as like, okay, I want to write a novel. What do I write about? I need a plot. I need a subject. I need blah, blah, blah.
Guilty.
What he's saying is like, you've got enough experience that, once you've got maybe a framework, you don't need to invent everything out of nothing. You don't have to come up with everything from scratch.
And I guess that circles right back to what Stephen King would say or what many contemporary authors would say about writing what you feel or writing what you perceive. You're taking little snippets of real life and you're turning them into something, you're weaving them into something bigger and different, something imaginary, but that feels really real because it's come from a truth that you know. I think you touched on something else that's, I guess, a little offshoot of this, which is what about when we're talking about in 2022 writing about a group of people or writing about an experience that isn't your lived experience? In 2022, we're very much about representing all parts of the world, all communities, and we want to see more of it. But what does that mean for an author? You know, it's kind of like walking on eggshells at sometimes of, I want to do this, but do I have the right? You know, it's not what I know. Do I have the right? And that's, I think, a tricky question for people now too.
Yeah, I've got that Bo Burnham song, Problematic, in my head right now.
He put it very well. I mean, it's a real problem. Like it can feel tokenistic. And, you know, I write in middle grade and I read in middle grade, and there's a lot of what I perceive to be tokenistic writing in that field where we're just trying to tick boxes of, and I know that's not the author's intention, so I don't want to be unfair there. I think the authors come at it absolutely with the intention of being representative, the intention of being real, because we're in a diverse community. Let's show everybody here. And of course, you'd be worse off if you were just showing your own individual experience with no diversity whatsoever. But to what I guess it's hard when, apart from being a woman, I guess if you count that sometimes as being disadvantaged, that I don't have an experience myself that would qualify me to write for a marginalised group.
Yeah. Look, I think my opinion is if you're treating writing as pure art, right, taking that view, then I would say, you know, you should be writing about what you want to write, regardless of what that means, and regardless of whether you know, if you want to write about a group that you're not part of, and that fits with what your goals are, your artistic goals, then you should do that. But there are also realities, and it really depends on what genre you're working within. And it really depends, you know, who your audience is, and are you trying to be a mainstream writer? Are you trying to be like a children's author? Because there are expectations. There are expectations, and maybe within the area that you're working with them within, the expectation is representation and diversity and all that kind of thing.
I think there is. I think in, you know, commercial fiction certainly, and in middle grade, it's not like a necessary feature, but certainly it's come to the fore that representation is important. I'm talking about disability representation, obviously cultural representation, gender and sexuality representation are all jumping to the fore. And there's a lot more books being published with those as key themes as well, and not just background elements, which I think is amazing, because I think we've got some catching up to do in terms of filling the bookshelves with representative stories. And I guess it's also obviously amazing that we are giving more opportunities to diverse groups who may not have had a voice before for whatever reason, some form of disadvantage that may have prevented them from having a voice. Now they have a voice, which is amazing. But we're probably talking about an industry which is still overrepresented by straight white people. And and you don't want to just write about straight white people. And so if we go back to the invent from what you know, I would feel really insincere writing about a character who's with a cultural background that I had no experience of. I have no friends with that background. I've never been to that country. I don't know anything about it. However, you know, I have friends with different cultural backgrounds who've grown up in other countries or different religions to my own, and I would feel more comfortable inventing a character with a similar background to these friends of mine because I have some knowledge of that. It's what I know. I guess if we're talking write what you know or invent from what you know, I would feel more comfortable inventing from that space.
Yeah, I think, like, to give an example, if you're writing, say I'm writing a story and I think, okay, I've got a great idea for a character, and that character is going to be trans, and that's going to be meaningful because of it fits into the kind of story I want to tell, it fits into the plot that I want discuss and the themes I want to go into. That's great. But do you then write a character in that is something that you wouldn't necessarily want to
just to like tick the to be tokenistic?
That's exactly tokenism. So like, but the output might also be good for the people who you're representing.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, I very strongly believe that representation is actually super important. And we both have 2 daughters each. And when you think of little girls, like you want them to feel represented in the world. And I can really see how much it means. And okay, if we're just going pure like cliche for my children here, I've got one with straight brown hair and I've got one with curly blonde hair. And whenever they see 2 characters together and one's a brunette, one's a blonde, like that's them.
Yeah.
And they each take on that role. And I mean, even if we go to Bluey, you know, when Bluey came out, the 2 Bluey dogs were my daughter's ages, and so they each adopted those roles. And Elsa and Anna, another classic, right? And I just feel like that's so nice for them. It's so nice for them to be able to identify with characters and to take on those really beautiful, like the strengths and the magical powers in some cases, and just feel associated with it. And so that comes around to The Little Mermaid, which, are you familiar with the new Little Mermaid?
Yes.
Yeah. You know, obviously there's outrage, like, you know, people are
outrage about everything,
clutching their pearls left, right and centre about the choice of the lead role in The Little Mermaid. But I just think how wonderful. Like that's so wonderful, and it's so important to so many people. I wouldn't be the one to write that story, to cast that person, but I'm so glad that that's happened.
Yeah. I think it's really important for kids' media.
Yes.
Definitely.
And that's my world, I guess. And the truth is, in middle grade, in the type of middle grade that I like to write, which is sort of these sort of suburban, you know, kids' books, just little local adventure kind of style, there is a lot of tokenism. And I'm not talking cultural tokenism. It's everything. Like literally every book in the genre I like to write, there's always a little girl who loves to bake cupcakes.
Yeah.
There, without exception, there's one who likes to bake cupcakes. There's the STEM girl, right? She's either like a computer programmer, or she's good at maths, or she's, you know, a little budding scientist of some form. That's a tick. And then we've got the environmental girl, you know, the environment eco warrior. And then we've got like the bossy boots one.
Yeah.
You know, and this goes back to Babysitters Club days of like you've got to be the arty one, or you've got to be the shy one, or you've got to be the bossy one, or you've got to be the cool one, and that's it. But I remember identifying with these characters as a child, and you know, you'd pick the one you were, and for some reason that felt really important at the time.
Yeah.
You know, which Spice Girl are you? Like, you know, to just sort of identify and I guess explore who you are through who these characters are. And I certainly think in middle grade that's a huge feature, that we've got these real, like, just, I don't know what you would call them, like cliche is not the word I'm looking for. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, these archetypal characters, and I don't know. Is that the same thing? It's, I don't know.
That's part of it. But then being so important for kids, and looking at kind of more adult media. I don't know if adult media is the right word.
You like to look at more adult media?
I don't know what the word for that is. Is it the same kind of issue? Like, do you have the same need for representation in books that are for,
I guess there's an expectation for adults in adult media that you would dive deeper into who the characters are, and probably, you know, it's a little bit more surface level in middle grade, just purely because you don't have the time and the words to go as deep as you would. So is it that the deeper you go into a character, the more you need to sort of know what you're talking about? You know, you can have a middle grade character who's got a family and who's got, you know, something they do every weekend because of their cultural background, and that's sort of as far as you need to go with it. They might eat certain foods, they might have certain words or practices that feel unique and special to that group. But if we're talking adult novels, like we're talking like potentially delving into someone's sexuality and how that impacts like every aspect of their lives, and I think that's very different to sort of just having these features of a culture, which is much more just pure representation and, as we've indicated, important. And I guess you're probably more likely to piss off adult readers as well, because I guess there's this sense that you're stepping on someone's toes.
Yeah. I think as long as you're respectful, as long as you take the effort to try and understand someone else's position, I don't think you can really be criticised for writing. You definitely can be.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't think you can legitimately be criticised for writing something that's not your personal experience.
And art is, you have to be brave. You know, if you really want to do it, you have to be brave. You have to be willing to risk the criticism because it's going to come, whether it's about that or something else. And I think you can maybe usually tell that whether someone's being disingenuous or whether they just genuinely wanted to write a character for whatever reason.
Our last segment is called Get Wrecked. This is where we subject each other to books, media, anything that I like or that you like, and then we make each other endure it, is basically the premise behind this. So what have you got for me?
Well, just thinking about the Babysitters Club, like which Babysitters Club member are you? Like I'm a Christie through and through.
So obviously I've read every single Babysitter. No,
yeah, obviously.
I don't know any of them. I don't know who they are.
All right, you're about to find out. So I'm going to recommend to you that you read Christie's Big Idea. Oh, sorry, is it Christie's Great Idea? Oh, my God. It's been too long. Christie's Great Idea, right? By Anne M. Martin, which is the first book in a about 500-book series, right?
Can I make a prediction?
Ooh.
Her great idea is to start a Babysitters Club.
I'm not going to tell you one way or the other whether your prediction is correct. You're just going to have to read it and find out with great anticipation. Now, listen, this is a multi-parter though, because that's too easy.
Yep.
Come on, that's a novella. Yep. I want you to also watch the original made-for-TV episode of Christie's Great Idea, and then I want you to watch the Netflix modern take on Christie's Great Idea.
Okay, so one book and 2 episodes.
1 book and 2 episodes, all the same story. Sounds good. I'm excited.
Okay, well, that's the show then for this week. Amanda, how can people reach us if they want to give us feedback or ask us questions?
Please don't give us feedback unless it's wonderful feedback. So you can email us at notquiterightpodcast@gmail.com, and you can catch us on Instagram at notquiterightpodcast or on Twitter at NQWpodcast. And if you've got any negative feedback, you can just file that straight in the bin.
So we're not going to read.
I'm very sensitive.
So don't even bother. All right.
Well, I've had a great time. This has been fun.
And we'll do it again in a couple of weeks.
Awesome.
All right. And until next time, right on.
Right on.